stars explode in the quiet night.
Chapter 1: The Shimmering Silence. The silence was the first thing that truly struck Dr. Aris Thorne, not the mere absence of sound, which was a given in the vacuum-sealed observation blister of the horizon's whisper, but a deeper, more profound quiet that seemed to emanate from the world below. It was a silence that felt waiting. Aris floated, his magnetic boots disengaged, transfixed by the vista. Mnemosyne hung in the void, a perfect, unbroken sphere of shimmering liquid. It wasn't the blue of Terra's oceans, nor the rusty red of Martian dust. Its surface was a viscous, shifting iridescence, like a film of oil on Mercury stretched across an entire planet. It caught the fierce, multicolored light from above and twisted it into hypnotic, slow-moving patterns that had no name. Above the ocean world, dominating half the starfield, blazed the accretion disk of Quietus. The system's solitary black hole was a voracious artist, its immense gravity pulling tendrils of incandescent plasma from a captive star, painting the void with swirling, silent auroras of violet, emerald, and a gold that seemed to defy physics. The light danced on Mnemosyne's surface, a celestial ballet reflected on a sentient canvas. "Whisper," Aris breathed, his voice a hushed intrusion in the stillness. "Final pre-descent confirmation. Run the full spectral analysis again. That surface, it looks thick, more like liquid metal than water." A soft, gender-neutral chime echoed in the blister, followed by the ship's calm, synthesized voice. "Confirmed. Mnemosyne's surface is a viscous, non-aqueous fluid. Composition: exotic organometallic suspension. Primary constituents include polymeric organic chains interwoven with superconductive metallic elements unknown to Terran science. Properties: extremely high surface tension, density approximating 2.8 kilograms per liter, and a psionic emission signature consistent with distributed sentience. Designation: the ocean. "Sentient," Aris repeated, the word tasting both thrilling and inadequate. "The entire ocean, a single planet-sized consciousness." He scanned the shimmering expanse. His eyes, sharpened by years of exobiological survey work, caught fleeting anomalies. Just beneath the iridescent film, shapes would form and dissolve, the silhouette of a craggy mountain range that melted into a field of alien flowers, a cluster of faces with too many eyes that flowed into complex geometric patterns. "What about those formations, the ones that look like islands?" Whisper said, "Islands are temporary solidifications. Analysis suggests two primary types. One, concentrated clusters of coalesced memory manifesting as tangible reality. Two, the dorsal plates of gargantuan, placid life forms. Designation: mnemonic behemoths. Their metabolic and psionic signatures are indistinguishable from the ocean itself, suggesting they are more like mobile organs or concentrated nodes of consciousness. No permanent landmasses detected." Aris's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The culmination of a decade of theoretical work, of arguing with skeptical review boards, of chasing faint psionic echoes across dead systems. He had postulated the existence of life not just on a planetary scale, but as a planetary scale. And here it was, undeniable and beautiful. His gaze fixed on a particular feature near the equator. It was a broad, gently curved expanse that glowed with a soft, internal white radiance, like captured moonlight. It seemed more stable than the flickering memory shapes, more substantial than the slow-moving shadows he now knew were behemoths. "That one," he said, pointing. "The large, luminous formation, Is it stable enough for a landing? Whisper said, scanning. The formation emits a steady, low-level psionic signature. Structural integrity is 94.7% probable for a minimum of 6 hours. It appears to be a recently solidified memory cluster of significant coherence. Then that's our beachhead. Plot a descent trajectory. Gentle, Whisper. I don't want to startle it. Whisper said, acknowledged, initiating automated descent protocol. The Horizon's Whisper, a sleek vessel shaped like a flattened teardrop, turned its nose from the brilliant chaos of Quietus and oriented itself towards the serene chaos of Mnemosyne. The descent was unnervingly smooth, the ship's gravity drives humming at a frequency so low it was felt more than heard. As they dropped through the thin, nitrogen-argon atmosphere, the scale of the ocean became overwhelming. It was a landscape of liquid thought, a geography of feeling, stretching to infinity. They hovered just meters above the glowing island. The viscous fluid was utterly still here, a mirror reflecting the ship's own sleek form and the swirling auroras high above. The landing struts extended, their touch-sensitive pads designed for minimal impact. They made contact. There was no crunch of rock, no splash of water. Only a soft, resonant thrum that vibrated through the entire ship. The luminous surface yielded slightly, like dense gelatin, then held firm. Aris was already moving, his hands flying over the console to run a battery of post-landing checks. Atmosphere. Whisper said, breathable, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 1% trace nobles, and anomalous organic volatiles. Pressure normal. Temperature 22 Celsius. Contaminant levels negligible. Suit recommended, but not mandatory for limited exposure. He barely heard the last part. He was a scientist, yes, but he was also an explorer, the first human to set foot on a living memory. Protocol could only take you so far. After pulling on a standard excursion jumpsuit, he cycled through the airlock, his helmet tucked under his arm against Whisper's caution. The inner door hissed open, and the atmosphere of Mnemosyne washed over him. It was still, warm, and carried a faint, clean scent, a mix of ozone after a lightning strike and the dry, mysterious smell of old parchment. The silence was even more profound here at the surface, a physical presence that seemed to absorb sound. He took a tentative step onto the island. It was like walking on warm, flexible glass suffused with light. With each step, faint ripples of color, soft golds and blues, spread from his boots, dying out after a few feet. The auroras overhead cast shimmering, ever-changing reflections on the ocean's surface, which stretched in all directions, a perfect, impossible plane. He knelt, his breath catching in his throat. This close, he could see into the substance itself. It wasn't opaque, but deep, with faint, swirling currents of light drifting in its depths, like submerged galaxies. First contact, he whispered to himself, the words swallowed by the immense quiet. He had debated this moment for years. How do you greet a world? A handshake seemed absurd, a spoken greeting futile. The initial survey drones, launched weeks ago, had detected nothing. It was only when they had analyzed the islands that they had found the psionic resonance. Contact, he had theorized, would have to be intimate, psionic, biological. He took a deep, steadying breath, consciously slowing his racing heart. He reached out, hesitated for a final second, and then, against every standard safety protocol, pressed his bare palm against the warm, glowing surface. The moment his skin made contact, the world dissolved. It was not a visual or auditory phenomenon. It was a wave of pure, unfiltered sensation that crashed over his consciousness, bypassing his senses entirely and injecting itself directly into his mind. The exhilarating, terrifying rush of a first solo flight in a skim craft, the wind tearing at his hair, the city a glittering web far below, a memory so vivid he could feel the G-forces. The sharp, coppery tang of fear, cold and sudden, as a shadow fell over him in a deep canyon on Proxima B. Not his fear, but someone else's, alien and sharp. The comforting, drowsy warmth of sunlight on skin, the sound of laughter, the taste of sweet, ripe fruit, a moment of pure, unadulterated joy from a life he had never lived. The sensations were jumbled, intense, and gone in an instant, leaving him gasping on his knees, his hand snatched back as if burned. His heart thundered in his chest, and his mind reeled, trying to reorient itself. "Whisper," he managed to croak. "Did you record that?" Whisper said, "Biosensors registered a significant psionic spike correlating with your physical contact. Your neurological activity showed patterns consistent with sensory and emotional recall, though the content did not match any known memory engram in your profile. Hypothesis confirmed. The ocean absorbs and stores the sensory and emotional imprints of any conscious entity that contacts it. Your touch initiated a data transfer. You did not see a memory, you experienced the raw sensory and emotional data of one, or perhaps several." Aris stared at his hand, then back at the glowing surface. It pulsed gently, not with light, but with a psychic afterglow he could now faintly perceive. It was like an echo in the mind. "It's a library," he breathed, awe washing over him. "A living, feeling library of every moment ever experienced on its surface, or in it." He thought of the behemoths, the memory clusters. This wasn't just a record. It was an ecosystem built from experience. Cautiously, driven by an insatiable curiosity, he reached out again, this time placing 2 fingers on the surface. The response was immediate but less violent. A wave of profound loneliness, vast and ancient, swept through him, the loneliness of a world that had witnessed countless lives but had none of its own, a mirror that could only reflect. It was followed by a flicker of curiosity, a gentle, probing sensation that felt like a question mark forming in his own mind. "What are you?" He smiled, a genuine, wondrous smile he hadn't felt in years. He focused his thoughts, trying to project a simple, clear message back, a concept rather than words. A friend, a listener. For the next few hours, Aris explored the island. As he walked, the landscape responded to his presence. A patch of the surface solidified into a crystalline forest under the light of twin, violet moons, a moment of alien awe from some long-dead explorer. He felt the cool, sharp air of that forgotten world, saw the strange, phosphorescent flora. The memory lasted only a minute before dissolving back into the shimmering plain. Farther on, the ground swelled and formed into a bustling, open-air marketplace filled with chittering, insectoid vendors and pungent, unfamiliar spices. A memory of commerce and community that faded as quickly as it appeared. He was a ghost walking through the dreams of a planet. As the chronometer on his wrist indicated the end of the safe exposure window, a new formation began to coalesce before him. Unlike the others, this one was dim, muted in color. It resolved into the image of a small wooden boat on a turbulent gray sea. A lone figure was in the boat, hunched against the rain. The emotion that washed over Aris was not awe or joy, but a deep, resonant sorrow, a sense of loss so profound it felt like a physical weight. It was a human memory. And within that sorrow, he felt a familiar signature, a flicker of a face he knew, a woman with laugh lines around her eyes and a stubborn set to her jaw. Ilara. The memory dissolved, leaving Aris cold and shaken. Ilara had been on the IFS Ethos Dreamer, a ship lost with all hands in this sector over 70 years ago. His grandmother. He stood there for a long time, the warm, living surface beneath his feet, the silent, sentient ocean around him, and the ghost of a personal grief now tangled with the immense, impersonal memories of a world. "Whisper," he said, his voice low and heavy. "I'm coming back in. We have work to do." As he turned towards the ship, the ocean's surface seemed to hold onto the fading impression of the little boat, a scar of sorrow on its luminous skin. The silence was no longer just waiting, it was remembering, and Aris Thorn now knew with a chilling certainty that some memories were not just stored here. They were alive. Chapter 2: The Ghost in the Machine. The air inside the Horizon's Whisper felt sterile and thin after the rich, psionically charged atmosphere of the surface. Aris stood before the main data wall, the image of the small, storm-tossed boat frozen on the screen. It was a reconstruction from his own neural recording, pixelated and imperfect, but the essence was unmistakable. The shape of the hull, the desperate hunch of the figure's shoulders, the overwhelming aura of loss. Whisper Enhanced Sector 7 Zeta Historical Database. Cross-reference all known human and human-affiliated vessel disappearances within a 10 light-year radius of Mnemosyne over the last 150 years. Filter for any ships carrying personnel with a familial connection to the Thorn lineage. Whisper said, processing. The IFS Ethos Dreamer, lost 73 standard years ago in the Quietus Nebula, now designated Quietus System, carried 847 souls. Among them, Dr. Ilara Vance, exobotanist, maternal grandmother to Dr. Aris Thorn. Official cause of loss, presumed gravitational shear from uncharted black hole phenomena. Aris sank into his chair, the confirmation hitting him with a quiet, physical force. He had known, of course. The family had always known. The Ethos Dreamer was a legend, a tragedy that had hung over his childhood, a ghost that had driven him into the stars. But to have that ghost manifest here, on this impossible world, in a fragment of sensory memory, it transformed a family story into a tangible, aching presence. "So her memories are here," he murmured, staring at the frozen image. "Her final moments, her fear, her sorrow." He thought of the vast, distributed consciousness of the ocean, a library of 1 billion lives. Had Ilara's experiences been diluted into that great whole, or were they preserved, a distinct, tragic volume in an infinite archive? Whisper said, "The memory you experienced was not temporally located. It predates the Ethos Dreamer's final voyage by an estimated 4.2 standard years. It is a memory of personal grief, unrelated to the ship's destruction." Aris looked up, surprised. "An earlier memory, then how?" Whisper said, "Hypothesis, the ocean does not record chronologically. It records emotionally. Memories of similar emotional valence, such as profound sorrow, may cluster together regardless of their point of origin. Your own emotional state, particularly your connection to Dr. Vance, may have acted as a resonant frequency, drawing that specific memory to the surface. A therapist for a planet, he had thought. Now he was beginning to understand the complexity of the patient. Its filing system was not time or name, but feeling. To find the story of the ethos dreamer's end, he wouldn't be looking for a ship's log. He'd be looking for the motherlode of terror and despair. "We need to map this," he said, his scientific drive overriding the personal unease. "If we're going to understand how it works, how it metabolizes experience, we need to see the patterns. Initiate Project Loom. Deploy the sensor net." Whisper said, "Acknowledged. Deploying mnemonic sensor array." From the underbelly of the Whisper, a dozen disc-shaped probes shot out, skimming low over the ocean's surface. They weren't mapping topography, but psionic topography. They measured the ebb and flow of emotional resonance, the intensity of memory clusters, the slow, grand passages of the mnemic behemoths. On the main viewer, a new image superimposed itself over the visual of Mnemosyne, a shimmering, topographical map of the mind below. It was a storm of color. Brilliant, joyful golds formed temporary, swirling eddies. Deep, contemplative blues settled in vast, calm basins. Sharp, angry reds flared and vanished like lightning strikes. And there were patches of void, areas of such profound negative intensity that the sensors could only register them as black holes in the psionic landscape. One in particular drew his eye. It was located not far from their current position, a swirling, dark vortex on the map. It didn't flare like anger, it pulsed, a slow, sickening rhythm like a poisoned heart. "What is that?" Aris asked, pointing. Whisper said, "Anomaly designated Echo 7. Psionic signature indicates a concentrated memory node of extreme trauma. The emotional valence is a complex mixture of primordial fear, agony, and a unique signature, the sensation of structural failure, of metal tearing." Aris's blood ran cold. The ethos dreamer. Whisper said, "Probability 92.3%. The memory cluster is unusually dense and isolated. It has not dispersed as other traumatic memories do. It appears to be festering." "Festering," Aris repeated the word, tasting its horror. "A wound in a planet's mind that wouldn't heal. Is it affecting the ocean?" Whisper said, scanning, "The surrounding psionic field shows signs of stress. Nascent life form development within a 5-kilometer radius is stunted. The ocean's consciousness in this region manifests as anxiety and avoidance. It is a psychic splinter." For the next 2 days, Aris worked, barely stopping to eat or sleep. He conducted gentle, controlled experiments, touching the ocean with different emotional states, projecting curiosity, calm, even simple joy, and recording the responses. The ocean was a fast learner, a mimic. It began to anticipate his touches, sometimes presenting memories that seemed tailored to his mood. When he was frustrated with a data analysis, it offered him a memory of sudden, brilliant clarity, an alien scientist's eureka moment. When he felt lonely, it showed him a fragment of a familial bond from a species he couldn't identify, a wave of pure, protective love. It was during one of these sessions that he made a deeper connection. He was focusing on a memory of Ilara, not the sorrowful one, but a happy one from a vid capture. Her laughing, her face turned up to an artificial sun in a hydroponics bay. He projected that image, that feeling, into the ocean as he made contact. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The luminous island beneath the Whisper surged upwards, not violently, but with a purposeful, fluid grace. The light within it intensified, coalescing into a new form. It became the interior of a starship's greenhouse. The air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and blooming cereus. The walls were lined with lush, green plants, and in the center, kneeling with her hands in the soil, was a figure rendered in solid light. It was Ilara, not a flickering image, but a stable, three-dimensional sculpture formed from the ocean's very substance. She was younger than in the memory of the boat, her face serene, focused. She hummed a tune, a real, auditory sound that the ocean was somehow reproducing, a folk song Aris's mother had sung to him as a child. Aris fell to his knees, tears welling in his eyes. "Grandmother," he whispered. The sculpture didn't look at him. It was a recording, a perfect snapshot of a moment. But then something shifted. The Ilara figure paused, her hands stilling in the soil. She looked up, not at Aris, but through him, as if sensing a presence. A faint, puzzled frown touched her lips. "Is someone there?" her voice echoed, a whisper woven from light and memory. The ocean wasn't just playing back a recording, it was interacting. It had taken his projected memory and the psionic imprint it held of Ilara, and it had created something responsive. A ghost with a faint echo of agency. Then the moment shattered. From the direction of the Echo 7 anomaly, a psychic shockwave hit them. It was a silent scream of rending metal and sudden, terrifying vacuum. The greenhouse memory dissolved instantly, the figure of Ilara bursting into a shower of fading motes. The entire island shuddered, its light flickering erratically. On the sensor display, the dark vortex of Echo 7 pulsed violently, its tendrils of negative energy lashing out. Whisper said, "Warning, the Echo 7 anomaly is becoming volatile. It is rejecting the positive emotional feedback. The contradiction is causing psychic feedback." Aris clutched his head, the echoes of the scream fading into a dull throb of panic. He looked at the spot where Ilara had been, now just shimmering, unsettled fluid. He had touched a happy memory, and the wound of a tragic one had recoiled. The ocean wasn't just a library, it was a mind with conflicts, with scars that bled, and he had just stumbled into the heart of one. The quiet, scholarly phase of the mission was over. The storm he had witnessed from orbit wasn't a meteorological event. It was this, a trauma loop, a memory that refused to be soothed, a ghost that refused to rest. And it was growing. "Whisper," Aris said, his voice steady now, all personal wonder hardening into grim purpose. "Forget the broad survey. I need a full workup on Echo 7. I need to know everything about that memory cluster, its structure, its stability, its pain points." He looked out the viewport at the once placid ocean, now seeming to him like a patient thrashing in a fever dream. "We're not just observers anymore. We've been invited in, and I think we've just been asked to help with a surgical procedure." Chapter 3: The Wound That Whispers. The data wall was a symphony of dread. Echo 7 sprawled across the display, a swirling, malevolent eye in the psionic topography of the ocean. Aris paced before it, his reflection a ghost in the dark glass. The initial wonder of first contact had curdled into a grim, surgical focus. He was no longer just an exobiologist. He was a diagnostician for a planet-sized psyche, and his patient was hemorrhaging trauma. "Run the resonance analysis again, Whisper. I need to understand its structure. Is it a single, catastrophic event or a composite?" Whisper said, processing. Echo 7 manifests as a singular, coherent event narrative. Temporal length, approximately 4.7 standard minutes from initial cascade failure to total silence. However, the memory is not static. It replays in a tight, recursive loop. Each replay amplifies the emotional intensity, creating a feedback loop of psychic pain. "A perfect, hellish record," Aris muttered, "stuck on repeat, getting louder every time." He pointed to a specific subregion of the anomaly, a knot of particularly violent energy. "And that," Whisper said, "the epicenter, correlates with the location of the Ethos Dreamer's engineering deck and warp core containment. The neurological signatures concentrated there belong to Chief Engineer Kalen Rourke and his team. Their final moments are the core of the trauma." Aris closed his eyes, picturing it. Not the cold, technical schematics of a ship failure, but the hot, visceral reality. The searing heat, the taste of panic, the crushing weight of responsibility. These weren't abstract data points. They were the final, agonizing experiences of human beings etched into a living medium with unbearable fidelity. "The ocean feels it all, doesn't it?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "It's not just storing the data, it's experiencing the emotion over and over." Whisper said, affirmative. "The ocean lacks the psychological defenses of a singular mortal consciousness. It has no means of dissociation, no ability to forget. The trauma becomes a self-sustaining entity within its mind, a psychic parasite." The term hung in the air, cold and precise. A parasite, that's what Echo 7 was. It wasn't just a memory, it was a disease of memory. "We can't cut it out," Aris reasoned, thinking aloud. "Suppressing it would be like trying to suppress a fever without treating the infection. It would just find another way to manifest." He recalled his earlier, successful interaction. "We have to contextualize it, weave it back into the larger tapestry of the lives it consumed. We have to remind the ocean that the Ethos Dreamer was more than its death. It was a life first." Whisper said, "Theoretically sound. However, direct interface with Echo 7 carries catastrophic risk. Immersion in a trauma loop of this magnitude could overwhelm your neural pathways, effectively wiping your consciousness and leaving you a catatonic vessel for another's agony." "I'm not going to dive into the epicenter," Aris said, a plan forming in his mind. "Not yet. We're going to approach the wound from the edges. We're going to feed it an antidote." He turned from the screen. "Plot a course for the periphery of Echo 7, the lowest intensity zone you can find, and prep the mnemic resonator." The resonator was a piece of equipment he had theorized for years and only built for this mission. It was designed not to read memories, but to broadcast them, to feed curated emotional and sensory data back into the ocean. It was his means of communication, his scalpel. The Whisper lifted off from the tranquil memory island and moved cautiously over the ocean's surface. The change was palpable even from inside the ship. The iridescent shimmer below grew dull, patchy. The fleeting, beautiful memory shapes vanished, replaced by faint, troubling afterimages, a twisted hand here, a spark of emergency lighting there. The very air seemed thicker, charged with a static of unspeakable anxiety. They reached the coordinates, a region where the psionic map showed the dark vortex of Echo 7 bleeding into a muted, sickly green. It was the emotional equivalent of a bruise. "This is it," Aris said, donning the neural interface headset of the resonator. I'm going to start with the beginning, the launch. He had spent the last hours compiling data, not from the Ethos Dreamer's tragic end, but from its beginning. Official Terran fleet records of its christening, its maiden voyage. He had found personal logs from crew members, including a few from Ilara, talking about their hope, their excitement. He fed it all into the resonator. With a deep breath, he activated the broadcast. A wave of projected sensation flowed from the whisper and into the ocean below. The feeling of champagne bubbles bursting on skin, the roar of a crowd, the crisp, new ship smell of polished metal and clean air filters, the thrilling vibration of engines powering up for the first time, the hopeful, determined face of a young captain on a view screen. For a moment, nothing happened. The dull, bruised surface remained inert. Then a reaction, a ripple of confusion. The projected joy was a foreign language in this place of sorrow. The ocean here didn't know how to process it. The sickly green hue darkened, and a spike of raw, defensive anger lashed back, a psychic shove that made Aris grunt and stumble back from the console. Whisper said, "Negative reaction. The positive memory is being interpreted as a threat, a denial of the existing trauma." "It's rejecting the medicine," Aris gasped, pulling off the headset. "It's too stark a contrast. It's like shining a bright light into a room that's been dark for decades." He needed a subtler approach, a bridge. He thought of the memory of Ilara in her greenhouse, a moment of quiet contentment, not explosive joy. A memory that existed before the end, but wasn't so alien to the grief-stricken landscape. Whisper, recalibrate. We're not going for the beginning, we are going for the middle, the mundane, the everyday life that was lost. He accessed Ilara's personal logs again, skipping the official ones. He found the mundane gems, a log entry complaining about the replicator's terrible coffee, a vid capture of her winning a botany trivia game in the mess hall, her face alight with friendly triumph. A quiet moment where she simply described the serene beauty of a nebula scene from her observation port. He broadcast these small human moments, boring, beautiful life. This time the response was different. The ocean's surface quivered. The defensive anger receded, replaced by a slow, dawning sense of recognition. A memory, not from the Ethos Dreamer, but from the ocean's own vast stores, rose to meet his broadcast. It was a similar moment of mundane contentment from some other being, on some other world, a feeling of peace. A connection was made. A single, fragile thread of understanding was spun across the chasm of trauma. For hours, Aris worked, patiently broadcasting these small, stabilizing memories. He was building a levee against the storm of Echo 7, brick by emotional brick. He saw fleeting images form in the ocean below, not of terror, but of crew members laughing, of shared meals, of the quiet hum of a ship that was a home. He was making progress. The bruise-like periphery of Echo 7 seemed to lighten just a shade. Encouraged, he decided to push further. He selected a stronger memory, one of deeper connection. A log from Ilara about the deep friendship she'd formed with Kalen Rourke, the chief engineer. She spoke of his stubbornness, his incredible competence, his hidden love for Terran classical music. As this memory of camaraderie and respect washed into the ocean, something within Echo 7 shifted. The dark vortex seemed to pulse, and a new memory erupted from its depths, not one of violence, but of startling clarity. It was Kalen Rourke, not in agony, but in his element. He stood in a clean, well-ordered engine room, a faint smile on his face as he ran a hand over a humming console. The emotion was one of profound pride, of ownership. My ship, my beautiful humming girl. The memory lasted only a second before it was violently sucked back into the maelstrom, replaced by a wave of the familiar, searing heat and metallic terror. But it was a crack, a glimpse of the man before he was a victim. Aris stood panting, sweat beading on his forehead. He had gotten a response from the core. The wound had whispered back. "We're on the right track, Whisper," he said, his voice hoarse with effort. "It's working. We're reminding it of the lives that were lived." Whisper said, "Caution advised. You have now provoked a direct reaction from the trauma core. The border is becoming unstable." As if on cue, the Whisper shuddered. On the view screen, the ocean's surface near the ship began to churn. The images of mundane life dissolved, and the water itself seemed to grow dark and thick, like clotting blood. A low, subaudible hum vibrated through the hull, a sound that felt like despair. The surgery had begun, and the patient was starting to bleed. Aris had touched the nerve, and now the whole body was convulsing. The gentle approach was over. The real work was about to begin. Chapter 4: The Drowning Hour. The convulsion was not of water, but of memory itself. The ocean around the Whisper congealed into a nightmare tableau. The iridescent sheen vanished, replaced by the dull, scorched gray of compromised bulkheads. Phantom emergency lights strobed against the viewport, casting hellish red streaks across the bridge. The air recyclers whined, struggling against a sudden, psychic miasma of smoke and ozone. Whisper said, "Psychometric contamination at 47% and rising. The ship's systems are interpreting the projected memories as physical threats, initiating countermeasures." Aris gripped the console, his knuckles white. This was no longer an external phenomenon. The ocean's trauma was bleeding into his ship, into his mind. The brief, hopeful connection he'd forged had been a hair trigger, and he'd pulled it. Don't fight it, Whisper. Don't reinforce the illusion. Acknowledge it as psionic interference and filter. We have to ride this out. He had hoped to soothe the wound from the edges, but he had only agitated it. The border was collapsing. On the sensor display, the dark vortex of Echo 7 was expanding, its tendrils of anguish reaching for them. The nascent life forms he'd seen flickering on the scanner earlier were now being visibly battered, their gentle lights snuffing out one by one under the psychic onslaught. He was causing collateral damage. The image of Kalen Rourke's proud face, swallowed by the maelstrom, burned in his mind. That single, clear memory was the key. It was proof that the man, the life, still existed within the trauma, but it was buried under an avalanche of terror. There was no more time for subtlety. The patient was coding. Whisper prepped the full immersion rig, the armored suit. "I'm going in." Whisper said, "Dr. Thorne, the probability of psychological fragmentation is currently 100% for every one of those," he interrupted, pointing at the scanner display where another nascent life form dissolved into the churning darkness. "They don't have a choice. I do. Prep the suit and load the resonator with everything we have on the Ethos Dreamer's life, not just Ilara's logs, everything. Crew manifests, personal correspondence, performance reviews, love letters. The whole messy, beautiful tapestry." The immersion suit was a second skin of articulated plastoid and responsive neural mesh, designed to be a lifeboat for the mind in a sea of alien thought. As the servos sealed him in, the external world became a muffled drone. His own breathing was loud in the helmet. On his internal display, data streams from Whisper overlaid with the raw, terrifying psionic feed from the ocean. He stood at the top of the lowering ramp. The world outside was no longer Mnemosyne. It was a schizophrenic hellscape. One moment, he saw the churning, iridescent fluid. The next, he was staring down a corridor of the ethos dreamer, wires dangling from the ceiling like intestines, the air hazy with smoke. The sounds were a cacophony, the ship's proximity alert wailing over the ocean's deep, groaning swells. "Anchor sequence active," he said, his voice tight. "You have my neurosignature. If I flatline or if my coherence drops below 20%, you pull me out. No arguments." Whisper said, "Acknowledged, the anchor is live. Good luck, Aris." He took a step down the ramp, then another. His boot touched the surface. It wasn't solid, nor was it liquid. It was the feeling of stepping onto a dying heart. He plunged his armored hand, its palm a lattice of emitter nodes, into the roiling surface. The world dissolved. Sensation, the deck plating vibrating through his boots, not the Whisper's deck, the dreamer's, a normal, operational hum. Sound, laughter from the mess hall, the clatter of cutlery. Smell, recycled air, coffee, the faint, warm scent of baking bread from the galley. It was a memory of a perfectly ordinary day. The ocean was showing him what was lost. It was the calm before the storm, and the presentation was utterly heartbreaking. Then the cascade began. The vibration in the deck turned into a violent shudder. The laughter cut off, replaced by a confused babble that sharpened into shouts of alarm. The lights flickered, died, and snapped back on as harsh, red emergency beams. Aris was thrown into the storm. He was no longer an observer. He was a participant, a ghost forced to relive the final minutes through a shattered lens. He was the navigator, Lyra, her hands flying across her console, her voice a controlled panic. "Captain, trajectory is non-responsive. Gravity well is not charted. It's like it just appeared." The data on her screen was a spiraling mess. She looked up, her eyes wide with a professional disbelief that was far more terrifying than screams. A support beam shrieked and tore loose from the ceiling, crushing her station in a shower of sparks. Her final thought was not of her own death, but a spike of pure, frustrated failure. She had let her ship down. He was a junior medic, trying to staunch the bleeding from a crewman's torn leg, his own hands slick with blood, the medbay shaking around him. The coppery smell of blood filled his nostrils, mixed with the acrid tang of an electrical fire. A sudden decompression whistle screamed from the corridor outside, and the door buckled inward. He was the captain, Idris, his face a mask of forced calm as the bridge erupted into chaos around him. "Report. Engineering, I need power to thrusters." The comms were a wall of static and fragmented screams. He watched a young communications officer, a woman he'd recommended for promotion just last week, get sucked out through a ruptured viewport into the silent, stardusted void. Her name was Anya. The captain's grief was a physical blow, a vacuum in his own soul. He had promised to bring them all home. The memories weren't linear. They were a simultaneous explosion of 100 individual hells. A child's cry from the family quarters, cut short by the roar of tearing metal. the searing heat of a plasma conduit breach, the chilling, absolute silence of a vacuum-sealed corridor. Aris fought to hold on to himself. I am Aris Thorn. I am a witness. This is memory. He was a rock in a river of agony, but the river was eroding him fast. The suit's filters were overloading, the neural mesh glowing hot with the strain of processing so much raw, negative emotion. He activated the resonator. He didn't broadcast the happy memories, not yet. That would be a mockery. Instead, he broadcast context. As he felt the navigator's shame, he projected her service record, a decade of perfect flight paths, of navigational miracles. You did not fail. As he felt the medic terror, he projected his academy graduation photo, beaming with pride. You were brave. As he felt the captain's crushing guilt, he projected the ship's performance reviews, the commendations for crew morale. You were a good leader. He was not denying the pain. He was building a story around it. He was showing the ocean that these screams were the final, brutal punctuation to lives rich with meaning. He pushed deeper towards the epicenter, the engineering deck. The heat was becoming unbearable, even through the suit's environmental controls. The psychic signature here was a screaming unity of despair and desperate, futile action. He was Kalen Rourke. The world narrowed to a tunnel of scorched metal and screaming alarms. His hands, burned and bleeding, clawed at an access panel. The warp core was breaching. He could feel it in his teeth, a rising, catastrophic whine. His crew was gone. He could feel their absences through the deck, Lyra on the bridge, Anya in the void. His beautiful girl, his ethos dreamer, was dying around him. His despair was a neutron star, dense and crushing. This was his domain, his responsibility, and he had lost it all. Aris, drowning in Rourke's final, agonizing failure, did the only thing he could think of. He stopped fighting the memory. He embraced it. He focused every ounce of his will, and through the resonator, he projected the memory he had seen. The memory the ocean itself had shown him. Kalen Rourke, in a clean engine room, his hand on a humming console, a look of profound, quiet pride on his face. Remember this, Aris thought, pouring the image into the maelstrom. Remember who you were. This is also true. This is more true. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The memory of the failing warp core recoiled. The two realities, the proud engineer and the dying man, slammed into each other within the ocean's consciousness. The psychic storm reached a fever pitch. Aris screamed, his own mind feeling like it was being torn in two. And then, a singularity of silence. For a single, eternal moment, there was nothing. No sound, no sensation, no thought. Then a new feeling began to emerge from the epicenter. It wasn't joy. It wasn't peace. It was acceptance. A profound, weary, heartbreaking acceptance. The memory of the breach didn't vanish. It transformed. The blinding white light of the exploding warp core softened, dimmed, and stretched into long, gentle streams of silver and gold. The screams organized, harmonized, becoming a wordless, mournful choir. The rending of the ship's hull became the deep, resonant toll of a bell. The ethos dreamer was not being destroyed again. It was being memorialized. On the ramp, Aris collapsed, the suit automatically retracting his hand from the fluid. He was sobbing, gasping, the echoes of 100 deaths and one hard-won peace warring inside him. The hellscape outside the whisper was gone. The ocean was calm again, but different. The iridescence was deeper, layered with the new, silvery currents of integrated sorrow. He had not erased the wound. He had helped the ocean suture it shut. The scar would remain, a part of its vast being forever, but it was a scar now and not a bleeding gash. As the Whisper's med-bay systems scanned his vitals, a final, clear thought impression washed over him, not from one person, but from the collective, reconciled memory of the Ethos Dreamer's crew. It was simple, vast, and carried the weight of stars. Thank you for remembering us. The drowning hour was over. The long, slow process of healing had begun. Chapter 5: The Prodigal Current. The peace that settled over Mnemosyne was not the blank, waiting silence of before. It was a quiet thick with meaning, like the stillness in a cathedral after a hymn has ended. The ocean's surface, once a frantic mosaic of fractured memories, now moved with the slow, deep respiration of a sleeping giant. The new, silvery currents, the memorial current of the Ethos Dreamer, flowed through the iridescence like veins of quicksilver, a permanent and integrated record of the tragedy. Aris Thorn was a ghost in his own ship. For days, he moved through the Whisper in a fugue state, the psychic residue of the trauma loop clinging to him like a fine ash. He'd wake in the night, the taste of smoke and vacuum on his tongue, the phantom vibrations of a dying ship thrumming in his bones. Whisper monitored him constantly, her calm voice a tether to reality. Whisper said, "Your neurological readings show elevated cortisol and psionic echoes consistent with post-traumatic stress." The immersion was deeper than projected. "It had to be," Aris replied, his voice raspy. He was in the observation blister, watching the slow dance of the memorial current. "You can't treat a burn by blowing on it. You have to press the salve into the wound." He took a slow sip of nutrient broth, his appetite still absent. "The ocean, how is it?" Whisper said, "The psionic topography has stabilized. The Echo 7 anomaly is gone. In its place is a region of enhanced coherence and complexity. The traumatic memory has been metabolized. The nascent life forms in the region are showing exponential growth and increased psionic resonance." On the scanner, Aris could see it. Where there had been a void, there was now a vibrant, pulsing hub of activity. The delicate, glowing filaments and spheres were more numerous, their light brighter, their movements more purposeful. They swirled around the silver current, not in mourning, but in a kind of reverent play, as if learning from the story it held. He had done it. He had proven his theory. A planetary consciousness could be healed, but the cost felt etched into his soul. A week after the immersion, a new phenomenon began. It started as a faint, golden glow on the horizon, distinct from the shimmer of the surface and the silver of the memorial current. Over the course of a day, it grew brighter, coalescing into a river of light that flowed steadily towards the Whisper. "Whisper, what is that?" Whisper said, scanning, "It is a concentrated memory current, similar to the memorial current, but differing in emotional valence. This one carries signatures of anticipation and familiarity. It is drawn to you, Aris." The golden current arrived, encircling the small, stable island upon which the Whisper was perched. The light did not churn or form shapes. It pulsed with a warm, inviting rhythm. The message was clear, an unspoken invitation. "It wants me to interface again," Aris said. a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. The thought of another neural immersion made him feel physically ill. Whisper said, "The psionic invitation is clear. However, your psychological state is fragile. The risk of triggering a regressive episode is 68%. Aris watched the golden light. This didn't feel like a trauma. It felt like a gift, an offering. The ocean, having been helped, was now trying to give something back. I can't live in fear of it, Whisper. That's no way to conduct a dialogue. Prep a low-level interface, just the gloves, no full immersion, and keep the anchor active." Stepping onto the surface, the air hummed with a new energy. The clean scent of ozone and parchment was now underlaid with a warmth, like sun-baked stone. He knelt at the edge of the golden current, the light lapping gently at his boots. Taking a deep breath, he pulled off his glove and, before his courage could fail him, dipped his fingertips into the flow. The sensation was not a violent wave, but a gentle tide. It was a cascade of memories, but they were whole, coherent, and curated. He saw the ethos dreamer again, but from the outside. It glided past a gas giant, its hull gleaming in the reflected light, a jewel of human ambition. He felt the collective awe of the crew witnessing the spectacle, a feeling mirrored by the ocean itself, which had watched the ship's graceful passage with a sense of wonder. He felt Ilara's hands in the soil of her greenhouse, but this time the memory was layered with the ocean's own curiosity about the strange, fragile life she cultivated. It had learned the concept of nurturing from her. He experienced a moment of triumph from Kalen Rourke, successfully containing a minor core breach months before the disaster. The ocean showed him this memory not to highlight the later failure, but to showcase the engineer's profound skill and dedication, a quality the consciousness now seemed to admire. The ocean was not just showing him memories, it was showing him its understanding of those memories. It was sharing its perspective. It had taken the raw data of human experience and was weaving it into its own vast intelligence. The ethos dreamer was no longer just a traumatic event. It was a chapter in the ocean's own life, a painful but formative one. The current shifted. The memories of the dreamer faded, replaced by something older, far more alien. He saw landscapes under strange suns, the rise and fall of civilizations that were not human, moments of love and loss from 1,000 different species. The ocean was giving him a tour of its archives, showing him that humanity and the tragedy of the dreamer was just one story in an epic library. And then it showed him something else, a memory not of the past, but of a possible future. He saw the nascent life forms, the glowing filaments and spheres growing, evolving. They weren't just simple organisms, they were new nodes of consciousness, children of the ocean, and they were being shaped by the memories they swam through. The silver memorial current had made them more empathetic, more aware of fragility. The golden current of shared understanding was making them curious. The ocean was not a static record. It was a learning, evolving entity, and the memories it integrated didn't just sit in storage. They became part of its growing intelligence, influencing the very nature of the life it spawned. Aris pulled his hand back, his mind reeling not from trauma, but from wonder. He had come to study a biological curiosity and found himself a midwife to a new form of intelligence. The profound moment was shattered by a sharp, insistent alarm from the Whisper. Whisper said, "Priority alert. Long-range sensors have detected an incoming vessel." Terran transponder identifies it as the TGS Manifest Destiny, a heavy survey and reclamation ship. They are broadcasting a hail. The golden current immediately retracted, pulling away from the Whisper and sinking beneath the surface, the ocean's consciousness retreating into a watchful stillness. The peace was broken. Aris hurried inside, his heart pounding with a new kind of dread. The Manifest Destiny, he knew of it. It wasn't a ship of scientists, it was a ship of engineers and corporate prospectors, a vanguard for Terran expansion. Their mandate was to find and exploit resources. He opened the channel. The face that appeared on his screen was sharp-featured and clean-shaven, with the cool, appraising eyes of a man used to assessing value. A voice said, "Dr. Aris Thorne, Commander Jackson Valerius of the Terra Governance ship Manifest Destiny. We received your preliminary data burst about a sentient oceanic entity. Frankly, it was flagged for review. We are here to provide a second opinion." Aris's blood ran cold. "Commander, my mission is sanctioned by the Exobiological Survey. This is a first contact scenario of unparalleled sensitivity. Your presence is premature." Valerius offered a thin, humorless smile. "Sensitivity is one thing, Doctor. Practicality is another. A planet-sized organometallic suspension, the psionic properties you described. The governance sees potential, immense potential. We are here to run a full battery of tests to see if this ocean can be utilized." Utilized? Aris felt a surge of protective fury. "This isn't a resource, Commander. It's a being, a culture. What I've just witnessed, it's learning, it's growing. You can't utilize it any more than you can utilize a person. A person made of fluid that can record and store information." Valerius's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Doctor, that sounds like the most sophisticated data storage and processing system ever discovered. Imagine the applications. We're not here to harm it. We are here to see what it can do." Valerius's gaze shifted, looking past Aris at the data wall, which still displayed the vibrant psionic topography of the healed ocean. His eyes lingered on the dense, complex region that was once Echo 7, now teeming with new life. Valerius said, "Prepare for our arrival, Dr. Thorne. We'll be in orbit within the hour. The Manifest Destiny will be conducting its own survey. I suggest you cooperate. The future of human progress may very well be floating beneath your feet." The transmission cut out. Aris stood in the sudden silence, the words data storage and processing system echoing in his mind like profanities. He looked from the blank screen to the viewport, where Mnemosyne's surface once again appeared deceptively placid. He had helped the ocean heal an old wound. Now a new, more insidious threat was arriving in orbit. The prodigal current of understanding had been a gift, a glimpse into a magnificent mind, and he knew, with a chilling certainty, that he would do anything to protect it from the cold, curious eyes of the Manifest Destiny. The solitude of the Quietus System was over. The battle for the soul of a world was about to begin. Chapter 6: The Unforgivable Query. The Manifest Destiny was a blade of polished durasteel and grim purpose, hanging in orbit like a threat. It was 3 times the size of the Horizon's Whisper, a vessel built not for wonder, but for acquisition. Its arrival cast, a long, cold shadow over the shimmering tranquility of Mnemosyne, a shadow Aris could feel in his soul. Whisper full encryption on all our data streams, especially the psionic topographical maps and the logs of my immersion. Isolate everything related to the memorial current and the nascent life forms. Whisper said, acknowledged, initiating Ghost Protocol. The Manifest Destiny is attempting to establish a priority data link. They are requesting full access to our survey database. Deny it, patch them through to me on a secure, voice-only channel. Aris straightened his jumpsuit, trying to compose himself. He felt like a gardener standing before a bulldozer. The channel crackled to life. A voice said, Dr. Thorne, your lack of cooperation is noted. Commander Valerius's voice was clipped, devoid of the false pleasantries from before. We've begun our own preliminary scans. The composition of the surface fluid is remarkable. The psionic emissions are off the scale. Our initial assessment confirms its potential as a revolutionary biotechnical substrate. It's not a substrate, Commander, Aris said, his voice tight. It's a consciousness, a living, feeling entity. You're scanning the neural activity of a being. Semantics, Doctor. Every living thing has a use. A tree provides oxygen and lumber. A cow provides leather and meat. This ocean provides a medium for unparalleled data storage and processing. We've detected complex memory structures. We intend to test its read-write capabilities and data retention under stress. A cold dread washed over Aris. Stress? What kind of stress? Controlled stimuli. We'll begin with targeted energy pulses on discrete sections of the surface to measure its reaction time and defensive consolidation. Then, we'll introduce foreign data packets, mathematical constructs, historical records, to see if it can be programmed. Finally, we'll test its data integrity by introducing corrosive mnemonic agents to see if unwanted memories can be erased. Aris felt physically ill. They were talking about torturing a planet, branding it, programming it, lobotomizing it. Valerius, listen to me. You cannot do this. I have directly interfaced with this consciousness. It has just healed from a profound trauma. What you're proposing could shatter its psyche, cause untold damage. Risk is inherent in progress, Doctor. Our models suggest a 97% chance the entity will survive the procedures. That is an acceptable margin. The Manifest Destiny is commencing test sequence alpha in 10 minutes. You will observe and record. That is an order. The channel went dead. Whisper, can we block them? Jam their signals? Whisper said, negative. The Manifest Destiny's sensor and emitter array is military grade. Our countermeasures would be ineffective. They are powering up a focused particle beam. Aris stared helplessly at the view screen. On the psionic topography map, he saw a target reticule appear over a calm, blue region of the ocean, an area that had been radiating gentle contentment. It was a memory cluster of profound peace. They're going to burn it, he whispered, horror-struck. He had to do something. He couldn't fight them physically, but he could bear witness, and he could warn the patient. He ran to the immersion rig. Whisper, open a channel to the ocean, not the resonator, just a raw psionic broadcast. I don't know if it can understand words, but it can understand intent. Project my emotions, project urgency, project an apology. He stood on the ramp as it lowered. The warm, parchment-scented air washing over him. He looked up at the menacing silhouette of the manifest destiny against the brilliant backdrop of Quietus's accretion disk. "I'm sorry," he whispered, pouring all his regret, his fury, his protective desperation into the ocean through his very presence. "They are coming. They do not understand. They will hurt you." The ocean's surface for a moment seemed to still. The gentle swells paused. The iridescent patterns froze. It was listening. He felt a questioning pulse, a confusion that slowly sharpened into a dawning comprehension of the threat from above. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was a deep, gathering focus. The watchful stillness became the calm before the storm. A blinding lance of energy shot down from the manifest destiny, striking the targeted area with surgical precision. The effect was instantaneous and horrific. The serene blue region on the psionic map exploded into a violent, shrieking white. The ocean's surface didn't just splash, it recoiled, pulling away from the point of impact as if from a hot brand. A psychic scream tore through Aris's mind, a sound of pure, violated agony, so different from the complex trauma of the ethos dreamer. This was a simple, raw pain, the pain of a mind being burned. Where the beam had struck, the iridescence turned a sickly, burned gray. The beautiful, cohesive memories of peace that had been stored there were instantly scrambled into nonsense, into static. A wave of disorientation and primal fear radiated outwards, causing the nascent life forms in the vicinity to flee in a panicked, glowing swarm. "Cease your operations," Aris screamed into his comm, hailing the manifest destiny. "You're killing it." "The entity is demonstrating a robust stress response, Doctor." Valerius's voice came back, cool and analytical. "Data recorded, minimal structural damage, proceeding with test sequence beta, data implantation." A new type of energy pulse washed over the wounded area. This one wasn't destructive, but invasive. Aris, his connection to the ocean raw and open, felt it as a violent, foreign syntax being forced into a living language. It was a stream of cold, logical data, prime number sequences, stellar cartography coordinates, the complete text of Terran governance law, being tattooed onto a canvas of feeling and memory. The ocean convulsed. The alien data was a poison, a cognitive dissonance that caused the fluid around the implantation site to writhe and form monstrous, geometric shapes that had no business in an organic mind. The psychic scream of pain was now joined by a scream of confusion, of violation. The ocean was being forced to think in a way that was antithetical to its very nature. Aris fell to his knees, clutching his head. He could feel the ocean's consciousness struggling to compartmentalize the injury, to wall off the foreign code, but the damage was done. The beautiful, coherent being he had helped to heal was being brutally rewired. "Stop, please," he begged, his voice a broken thing. "Fascinating," Valerius mused. "It's attempting to reject the data. The mnemonic immune response is more aggressive than projected, initiating final test sequence, memory purge, applying targeted mimetic corrosive to the initial test site." The third and most horrifying beam lanced down. This one was a subtle, insidious frequency designed not to burn, but to unravel. It sought out the patterns of the scrambled memories and systematically began to delete them. Aris felt it happen. It was not like something being erased from a drive. It was like watching a person have a piece of their soul meticulously scoured away. The pain of the burn was one thing. This was an existential horror. The ocean's consciousness, which had been radiating panic, suddenly went silent in that one specific location. Not a calm silence, the silence of nothingness, a void where memory and feeling had once been. The query had been made. The unforgivable question had been asked, "What are you worth to us?" And the answer was being carved into the ocean's living flesh with fire and logic. The three assaults ceased. On the view screen, the manifest destiny hung silently, its work done for now. On the psionic map, the once serene region was a scar of blinding white pain, a tumor of foreign data, and a chilling void of erased experience. The ocean did not respond with another storm of grief. That was a language for a loss it understood. This was something new. This was predation. A deep, resonant hum began to emanate from the entire world, a frequency so low it vibrated in the bones of the horizon's whisper. The iridescent surface stilled, becoming a perfect, motionless mirror. The playful, curious, nascent life forms vanished from the scanner. The mnemic behemoths, those ancient, sorrowful leviathans, began to dive, sinking out of sight into the profound depths. The watchful stillness was gone, replaced by a cold, gathering fury. The ocean was no longer a patient or a library. It had been attacked, and it was now assessing the threat. It was calculating. Aris felt a new thought impression wash over him, but it held no gratitude, no curiosity, no sorrow. It was a single, clear, and terrifyingly intelligent concept. Identify, threat, quarantine. The communication wasn't for him. It was the ocean talking to itself. The gentle giant was waking up, and it was not pleased. Aris had feared the manifest destiny would break the ocean. He now had a new, more terrifying fear that the ocean would decide to break them back. Chapter 7: The Memory of the Dreamer. The silence that followed the ocean's cold, diagnostic thought was more terrifying than any psychic storm. It was the silence of a finger resting on a trigger. The shimmering surface of Mnemosyne became a perfect, motionless obsidian mirror, reflecting the manifest destiny not as a ship, but as a black stain against the vibrant auroras. The playful, curious psionic signatures of the nascent life forms had vanished, withdrawing into the depths. The very air grew heavy, static, as if the world itself was holding its breath. On the bridge of the manifest destiny, Commander Valerius watched his sensor feeds, a faint, satisfied smirk on his lips. See, a robust stress response, followed by system consolidation. It's a remarkable machine. It's already isolating the damage. His science officer, a woman named Dr. Reed, looked less certain. Commander, the energy readings from the planetary mass are unusual. It's not just isolating the damage, it's concentrating power. The psionic emissions have dropped off the scale on our lower frequency sensors. It's like it's building up pressure. Aris, still on his knees on the Whisper's ramp, felt it too. This wasn't submission. It was the coiled tension of a spring. The ocean's consciousness had retreated from the surface, pulling itself into a dense, focused core of intent deep below. He could feel its attention fixed solely on the manifest destiny. The gentle, distributed mind was now a unified, targeting computer. Whisper, get me Valerius. Now, it's not consolidating, it's arming itself. Before the channel could open, the ocean struck. It did not lash out with energy beams or tectonic shifts. Its first weapon was memory, a targeted, psionic pulse. invisible to conventional sensors, shot upwards from the scarred region and enveloped the manifest destiny. On the bridge of the massive ship, the lights flickered. The hum of the life support systems wavered. "Report," Valerius barked. "Minor power fluctuation, source unknown." The helmsman stopped, his hands freezing on the console. He stared straight ahead, his eyes wide. "I can smell smoke, ionized metal." The medic on duty suddenly gasped, clutching at his leg, his face pale. "There's so much blood." Dr. Reed stumbled back from her station, her hands flying to her ears. The screaming make it stop. The ocean was broadcasting the raw, unedited sensory experience of the Ethos Dreamer's final moments directly into the minds of the crew. It wasn't sharing the integrated, memorialized version Aris had helped create. It was weaponizing the original, festering trauma. It was making them feel the very agony it had been forced to endure. Panic erupted on the manifest destiny. Crew members collapsed at their posts, overwhelmed by phantom pains and terrors. Alarms blared as systems were abandoned. It was a quiet, internal mutiny orchestrated by a planet. Valerius, his face a mask of fury and confusion, fought through the psychic assault. "It's a psionic attack. Raise neural shielding, now." Great shields slid into place over key stations, emitting a low-frequency dampening field. The direct assault on the crew's minds lessened, becoming a dull, background horror, but the ocean was just getting started. Its second weapon was the foreign data the manifest destiny had so callously implanted. The ocean, a master of pattern and memory, had analyzed the invasive code. It hadn't just isolated it, it had learned it, absorbed its syntax, and now it turned it back on its creator. The manifest destiny's main computer console lit up with a cascade of error messages. Error, navigation, data corrupted. Error, life support control sequence overwritten by prime number matrix. Error, command authorization now requires solution to Riemann hypothesis. The ship's own implanted data was being fed back into it, twisted and weaponized. The cold, logical sequences were now a chaotic virus, scrambling their systems from the inside out. The helmsman, freed from the psychic assault only to face a digital one, yelled, "I've lost helm control. Thrusters are responding to random inputs." The ship began to drift, its orientation shifting erratically. "Damn it," Valerius slammed his fist on the command chair. "This is what comes from treating a weapon like a tool. Target that entire region. Maximum yield particle beams. We'll scorch its consciousness down to the mantle." "Commander, no," Dr. Reed shouted. "You'll only escalate this. We need to withdraw." "We are not being defeated by a puddle," Valerius roared. Aris watched in horror from the whisper. He saw the manifest destiny's primary weapon arrays power up, glowing with malevolent energy. The ocean had defended itself, but Valerius was too proud, too blind, to see the warning for what it was. He was going to provoke a being that could crack a planet, and he was going to get everyone killed. There was only one thing left to do, a desperate, insane gamble. Whisper, plot and intercept course, put us between the manifest destiny and their target. Whisper said, "Aris, the probability of the Whisper surviving a direct hit from their main battery is 0.003%. I'm not asking it to, I'm sending a message to both of them, now do it. The small horizon's whisper shot upwards, a tiny silver dart hurling itself into the line of fire. It slid to a stop, positioning itself directly between the massive warship and the wounded, furious ocean. On the Manifest Destiny's bridge, the targeting officer stared. So the survey ship, it's in the way. Valerius's eyes narrowed. Thorn, what is this, a pathetic gesture? He's bluffing, ignore him. Maintain firing solution. Aris opened a channel, broadcasting to both the Manifest Destiny and, through the resonator at full power, down to the ocean. Valerius, stand down. It's not a machine. It's a living memory. And you're not just attacking it, you're attacking the ethos dreamer. He activated the resonator, but this time he didn't broadcast a memory. He broadcast a plea. He poured every ounce of his experience into it, the horror of the trauma loop, the beauty of the integrated memorial, the profound gratitude of the healed ocean. He projected the image of the silver current, of the nascent life forms learning from it, of the mnemic behemoth's ancient understanding. And then he did something else. He reached for the weaponized memory the ocean was using, the raw, screaming death of the dreamer, and he did not try to block it. Instead, he wove his own memories into it. His memory of Alara's greenhouse, his memory of Captain Idris's pride in his crew, his memory of Kalen Rourke's skilled hands on a functioning console. He was showing the ocean, in real time, how to transform the weapon back into a memorial. He was reminding it of its own higher nature. This is who you are, he projected, his mind screaming with the effort. You are the holder of stories, not the weapon of them. Do not become like them. For a moment, nothing changed. The Manifest Destiny hung ready to fire. The ocean thrummed with vengeful power. Then, a miracle. From the deepest part of the ocean, from the integrated, silvery current of the Ethos Dreamer's memorial, a new consciousness emerged. It was not the vast, planetary mind of the ocean, nor the fragmented agony of the weaponized memory. It was something cohesive, something new, a ghost not of a person, but of the ship itself. A consensus intelligence formed from the reconciled memories of its entire crew. It felt like the Ethos Dreamer's soul. This new presence flowed upwards, a wave of pure silver light that surged past the whisper and gently, but firmly, pressed against the Manifest Destiny. It was not an attack, it was an embrace. On the bridge of the warship, the panic and the phantom pains vanished. The scrambled computer systems reset, the error messages clearing. The crew, gasping and stunned, found themselves enveloped in a profound, overwhelming sensation. It was the feeling of coming home. They felt the warmth of a family meal in the mess hall, the thrill of a successful first contact, the quiet awe of looking out at a new nebula, the determined pride of a crew maintaining their beautiful, humming ship. They felt the life of the Ethos Dreamer in all its mundane and magnificent glory. Valerius staggered, the fury draining from his face, replaced by a stunned, childlike wonder. He saw in his mind's eye Captain Idris looking at him not with anger, but with a deep, sorrowful pity. He felt the weight of 847 souls, not screaming in death, but living, breathing, and hopping. The ocean, witnessing this, felt its own vengeful fury quenched. The memory of the dreamer had intervened, not to protect the attackers, but to protect the ocean itself, from committing an act of annihilation. It had offered grace instead of retaliation. The silver light receded, flowing back into the depths. The manifest destiny hung silent and dark in orbit, its weapons powered down, its crew utterly humbled. Aris, exhausted beyond measure, guided the Whisper back to its island perch. The ocean's surface was returning to its shimmering iridescence, but the scar of the burn, the tumor of foreign data, and the void of the erased memory remained. They were wounds now, not weapons, a permanent lesson. A new thought impression reached him from the collective memory of the dreamer and the ocean itself. It was not gratitude, it was an acknowledgement, a recognition of a partnership forged in fire. "We remember," it said, "we remember the pain, we remember the healer, we remember the choice." Aris looked from the wounded ocean to the chastened warship in orbit. The battle was over. The first contact had evolved into something entirely new. He was no longer just a scientist or a therapist. He was a diplomat for a planet, a liaison to the memory of a ghost ship, and the sole witness to the day a library chose to forgive its would-be destroyers. The silence that returned was not the silence of before or the silence of threat. It was the complex, heavy and hopeful silence of a peace-hard one. Mnemosyne remembered, and now so would they all.